Hello, my dear lovelies. Aren't you just feeling the love? The love is just in the air right now. So much love that we can just ignore the fact that this video is a little bit late. I was sent this video. Well, I was sent one of these videos. Overly Sarcastic Productions has two Valentine's Day specials. Thank you to Nikolai Quack for sending me the second one, but I decided, no, I want to do the first one first, and then I'll do the second one. But then I missed it on Valentine's Day, and then I thought it would be stupid to do it any other day, and then I realized, oh, maybe I could get away with it if I do it in February, and then I waited towards the end of the month, and now I have like the minimum amount of time to get both videos done. So today and tomorrow I'm going to be trying to do the Valentine's Day specials from these guys, and I really like them, but I don't like to be put on kind of like in time constraints. I like to do things just whenever I happen to feel like doing them. So the fact that I've backed myself into a corner here, it's a little weird for me to be like, okay, I am doing this one today, I'm doing that one tomorrow. I'm so used to just being like, yeah, I feel like doing this one. But I am excited about this because I really like these guys. I enjoyed their video on the history of Ireland, and I want to explore more of their stuff, and to do something kind of thematic like this, it's cute. It should be fun. So let's get this started. The best couples in history.
Valentine's Day is upon us, and that means exactly two things. First, today is the perfect day to talk about some of history's most famous couples, and second, hit the grocery stores tomorrow and all the chocolate on earth is going to be on sale.
Oh, hell yeah.
Godspeed, friends. All right, let's do some history. First, let's hop all the way back to Homer's Iliad, which sees our hero Achilles reacting extremely poorly to the loss of his one true love. And before you ask, no, I am not talking about his war bride Briseis, I'm talking about his boyfriend Patroclus, because of course I am.
Ooh.
And their story actually...
So with the Iliad and the Odyssey and just Homer's stuff, I've not actually read them cover to cover. I've read some of the Odyssey for like an old literature class that I took once, but I only had to read excerpts and stuff. Like if I had to read the whole Odyssey, it would take longer than that class would have allowed. It would have been a whole class on the Odyssey because the book is like the size of the Bible, probably. I don't know. I haven't measured it, but so I'm a little bit disconnected from this, but yeah, spoilers, whatever. I'm fine. If I was going to read it, I would have done it already.
Loss of his one true love. And before you ask, no, I am not talking about his war bride Briseis, I'm talking about his boyfriend Patroclus, because of course I am. And their story actually starts a ways before the Trojan War. As a child, Patroclus was banished from his homeland of Locris by committing an oopsie-doopsie manslaughter on one of his friends, and sent across the Malian Gulf to Phthia to serve as a squire for the young prince Achilles. According to the poet Hesiod, Achilles and Patroclus grew up together, trained together with the centaur Chiron, and when news of the Trojan War came to town, they both noped right the heck on out of there to the island of Skyros. There, Achilles disguised himself as one of the king's daughters and almost dodged the draft until buzzkill Odysseus came to cash in that pesky little pan-Hellenic blood oath. And so our story takes...
This is kind of interesting because this guy you guys have told me is more like the history dude, and that the girl is the one who does... I guess they're red and blue, right? Like they're like Pokemon characters or something. That blue is more of the history person, that red is more the literature person. But we have him kind of taking on some old school literature stuff, which... There's a lot of crossover with old literature and history and how people have interpreted history because of stories that have been told in the past. So naturally, there is going to be a little bit of crossover there, especially with tales as epic and well-read as like the Iliad and the Odyssey.
Takes us to the beach. Odysseus came to cash in that pesky little pan-Hellenic blood oath. And so our story takes us to the beaches of Troy, where it seems like nothing really happens for 9 straight years, and then suddenly everything happens all at once.
Oh.
You all know the drill. Achilles gets mad at the most infuriating character in ancient history. He and Patroclus go to sulk and also bang maybe. Then Patroclus gets dressed up in Achilles' armor to go fight the Trojans. This works astoundingly well until Apollo nerfs his spatial awareness, and the ensuing hailstorm of javelins does him in shortly after. This, of course, sets the plot into Act 3, where Achilles goes justifiably berserk over the death of his person and murders his way across the Trojan army until he gets murdered back. War, am I right? Per Achilles' own request, his ashes were mixed with Patroclus in the same funerary urn so that they could be with each other
Oh,
for
that's
eternity.
cute.
Now, to anybody with basic reading comprehension, this is an extremely touching story of a lifelong love. A story so central to the plot of the Iliad that the epic literally doesn't make sense if Achilles and Patroclus don't love each other more than life itself. But scholars and historians haven't always seen it that way. Now, I partly wanted to talk Patroclus because it's emblematic of how LGBT history can be ignored and even totally rewritten. Heck, in 2003's Troy, Achilles and Patroclus are recast as cousins because the only way the filmmakers could justify their all-consuming love in a totally not gay manner was to make them blood relatives. And this isn't
This is an interesting subject because this is something that I've talked about a little bit on the channel, but not all that much. When interpreting this stuff in the past, sometimes there's like really good examples. I don't know about this one nearly as much, but a lot of the time, for every example where it's like, oh, well, maybe, there's some that's like, okay, you just don't understand how they're writing at the time. So it's kind of like a hit or miss thing. But yeah, there is an issue with people having kind of ignored those possibilities that there could be LGBT figures in the past. Because like, this isn't like a new thing. This didn't just like pop up in like the 20th century or whatever. It's been around forever. But also it is very difficult to prove a lot of the time. Like I've not read like the Iliad or the Odyssey cover to cover, so I can't really speak to this one. It gets especially confusing when you're reading stuff from people who write in like the romantic style, because that gets really confusing because everybody is like writing to each other like they want to frick each other or something, and that's kind of hilarious, but can also send some confusing signals to the modern reader. So it's hard to tell like what's like actually romantic and what is just a product of their writing. It's really a confusing process.
Limited to Hollywood, because if a classicist can look you in the eye and tell you that Sappho's poems are just gals being pals, then you know that the open acknowledgement of LGBT history is gonna be a little sparse. Even in ancient Greece, the single gayest locale in history. In conclusion, if you want a good dose of the ancient OTP, go read the Song of Achilles. Thank me later.
Okay.
Now let's skip ahead a millennium here to the tale of our favorite disaster couple, Cleopatra and...
I'm getting some buffering issues here. Maybe I normally wouldn't do this, but I'm taking this down to 720. See if we have any issues here. My internet here where I'm at right now is just inconsistent, so maybe I can make this a little smoother. All right.
Mark Antony, born into the disaster...
I'm sorry, what?
Of our favorite disaster couple, Cleopatra and Mark Antony. Born into the disaster dynasty that was the Ptolemaic family, Queen Cleopatra of Egypt had previously been the squeeze of choice for famed womanizer and knife wound aficionado Julius Caesar. But for this story, we're skipping ahead to the part where Caesar's adopted heir, Caesar's favorite general, and some loser third guy divvied up the Roman Republic between them. Octavian took Italy in the west, and Marcus Antonius took Greece in the east. Strategically speaking, Cleopatra needed Rome's support to keep Egypt independent, and Antony needed Egyptian money and manpower to help him fund a campaign against the Parthians. Out of convenience alone, Antony's Eastern Rome and Cleopatra's Egypt were a perfect match, and it just so happened that Antony and Cleopatra got along pretty well too. In the decades since...
Cleopatra is just fascinating as a figure, as one that I've never really studied. As far as like old school rulers go, I think she's one that I am more interested in than a lot of others, because it's not completely unprecedented that you find women in roles of leadership. It does happen, but it's rare, and she is probably the most iconic to like hold that position of leadership, and that is inherently meaningful. And I would like to know a little bit more about like the government structure and how that really worked with her. And it really means nothing to me if I don't understand the civilization built around her. So I feel like I can't fully appreciate Cleopatra. It's unfortunate.
Perfect match, and it just so happened that Antony and Cleopatra got along pretty well too. In the decades
Send
since
legions.
their first meeting,
It's fine.
Cleopatra and Antony fell in love, had 3 children together, and slowly went about consolidating their states into a shiny new Romano-Egyptian
Yo.
empire. They established a formal imperial succession.
No way she was
between
that
their
white,
children.
right?
Antony gave Cleopatra a few Roman provinces. Cleopatra gave Antony an army that evaporated on first contact with the Parthians. Antony's political and military power soon became wildly outgunned by Octavian in the west, and this formerly bulletproof alliance was starting to buckle under its own weight.
That's unfortunate.
Undaunted by the impending perils of war with Western Rome, Antony and Cleopatra hosted an elaborate festival where they awarded their children with Roman provinces, Egyptian territories, and entire kingdoms yet unconquered,
sick.
basically gifting the entire Eastern Mediterranean to one middle schooler and 3 toddlers.
I actually didn't know anything about this sort of stuff here. Like, I've dabbled a little bit into, like, Roman history and stuff, but a lot of it that I've learned picks up in, like, the classes that I've taken. A lot of them kind of don't do as much Julius Caesar and, like, that stuff, but, like, pick up with Octavian, which I find rather interesting why my professors have gone that particular route. Like, I mean, there's a little bit of foundation there that's set, but I guess I never really learned that much about this stuff. Like, the most I know about some of these people is from, like, the Shakespeare play. And it's a great book, but yeah, it's not quite the ideal biography.
Shudder to imagine what the baby shower's gift registry must have looked like. Yes, so I see here that you're interested in buying the island of Cyprus for the royal baby, but unfortunately, Senator Lucius has already purchased it. Could I perhaps interest you in a subtler and more intimate gift? Like the Parthenon.
Okay, that's kind of funny.
Okay. Things really went south for them at the Battle of Actium against Octavian, where Cleopatra bailed from the fight entirely and Antony followed swiftly after. Now, abandoning your entire navy is a less than optimal battle strategy, so from there it was pretty much game over. Sources from Plutarch to Shakespeare proceed to squeeze every last ounce of drama out of the defeated couple with elaborate suicides and picturesque scenes of dying in each other's arms, but the reality was probably a little less theatrical. Whether you subscribe to the
Darn.
snakebite or not, there's no denying that the tale of Antony and Cleopatra just bleeds tragedy. 2 monarchs starting on top of the world only to be crushed by the weight of their own hubris. So for all of their genuine love, they are nonetheless history's prime disaster couple. Hopping forward...
That's an interesting way to think about that. That one I was able to follow a little bit better. I think with the Iliad stuff, he expected me to have read that first. I'm sure they did like a video on the Iliad or the Odyssey that I probably should have watched first. That maybe that could have given me a little bit of foundation before this. But like I said at the beginning, we got 2 days to get these 2 videos done, so I wasn't able to do that. Maybe I'll go into some of Red's videos on some of that old literature stuff that maybe I don't intend on actually reading, because, like, who's got the time to read everything they want to read, am I right? But I had a little trouble following that stuff. I followed the Cleopatra Mark Antony thing a little bit more easily. I think that's a story that didn't... I guess I knew enough of the background. Just enough. Not much, but just enough.
One metric Roman Empire, we arrive at the Byzantine royals, Justinian and Theodora. Ruling
Oh,
together from the 520s
Justinian.
to the late 540s, Justinian and Theodora were the definitive imperial power couple of the ancient world. And they oversaw everything from the sweeping reconquest of the Western Mediterranean, comprehensive legal reforms, and an extensive building program. But professional accomplishments aside, it's their private lives that raise the most eyebrows. Justinian's uncle and adoptive father Justin started as a humble farmer before becoming emperor, and Theodora was the daughter of a bear trainer in Constantinople's Chariot Stadium. I'll be entirely honest, until right now I didn't know that they had bears involved in the chariot races, but...
I didn't know that either. I knew a guy who was, like, totally obsessed with Justinian, and I wish I had the ability to contact him, because I would love to introduce you guys to him. That guy could talk ancient world, Middle Ages, like all the stuff that I didn't know that well. Like, he was great at that stuff, and Justinian was like his go-to guys. And there's an extra history series on Justinian that I'm looking forward to checking out. Hopefully sooner rather than later, because I found him so hard to follow. When I took a class on the Middle Ages when I was finishing my bachelor's degree, and my God, I don't remember a thing about it. I knew that Justinian was there, but when you're struggling and just can't like keep up with things, and then you start studying to a test, retention gets worse. Like, yeah, I'm studying to the test, and I have everything in my head up until I finish that test, and boom, it's all out the other end. So that's kind of where Justinian went as far as I can go.
To be entirely honest, until right now I didn't know that they had bears involved in the chariot races. But now that my curiosity has been piqued, I am dismayed that I will never see a real-life chariot race. Anyway, early in her career, Theodora was an actress, which Romans actually viewed as demeaning, since actor was a byword for stripper, which was a byword for prostitute. Now, it's worth noting that our best source for this period is one dude named Procopius, who wrote a handful of accounts about Justinian and Theodora. Most of them are fairly straightforward and praiseful, but in the Renaissance we discovered his secret history, which goes out of its way to paint the royal pair as duplicitous, malevolent, and extremely slutty.
Yeah, I found that this is one of the complicated things that I found when studying Middle Ages, ancient history, and any of that sort of older stuff. They had a lot of sanctioned historians. I don't know what he was in this case, but real historians are few and far between. It's not the same field that it is today, obviously. But yeah, like entire fields are built upon the foundation of very few works, and they have to figure out what's right, what's wrong, and where these people's biases are. And like we have that later on, but usually you have a little bit more to work from. I work in the 19th century, and there's so much writing because of Protestant tradition and stuff like that, among other reasons. But when I had to do a paper on like Rome, I had so much trouble working with the primary sources there. It's really difficult.
Not going to go into details because I like my monetization, thank you very much, but if you're jonesing for a thrill, go look up Secret History Theodora Geese. Now, all this historical shade-throwing notwithstanding, the relationship between Justinian and Theodora was a somewhat unlikely one. Theodora came from a lower class, and her family wasn't a political asset, and there was even a law in place to stop high-ranking officials from marrying actresses. But as soon as the two met, they fell in love, and then Justinian axed the law about not marrying actresses, and they became an unstoppable team. While Justinian focused on the big-picture imperial business, Theodora managed all of the backdoor diplomacy and stopped court frustrations from slipping into conspiracy territory. Early in their career, when rioting sports fans were several days into their quest to burn Constantinople to the ground and Justinian was making plans to escape, Theodora convinced him to stay and face the crisis. A decade later, Justinian...
May I never be deprived of this purple robe, and may I never see the day that when those who meet me do not call me Empress. Purple robe, I do know something about that. Like, the purple was used, it was kind of like a royal color, but it wasn't like, it's kind of like back then purple was a little bit more of like a redder tone thing. It's weird when you look up like the purple that they wore, you'll be like, that's not purple, that's like, what is that, like magenta? No, that's not it. It's like kind of like a darker reddish purple, like add a significant amount more red to your purple. And you get what they had back then. If you wish to save yourself, my lord, there is no difficulty. We are rich. Over there is the sea, and you know, I assume this I can do without this.
Making plans to escape, Theodora convinced him to stay and face the crisis. A decade later, Justinian had fallen into a coma, and Theodora held the empire together in his absence, dodging what really should have...
Oh, maybe she actually wore, because that looks more like conventional purple. I'm thinking of like what the Romans wore like in their original run. Maybe they were getting more towards a regular purple there, because that looks like what I think of when I think purple. But the purple described by like during the time of like Julius Caesar, he would have probably worn something a little bit more on the red side from what I'm aware.
been a civil war.
That's interesting.
And after Theodora died in 548, Justinian never remarried. And though he kept things moving for the last 17 years of his reign, he was never as sharp as he had been when he had Theodora by his side. Between her
That's
and
really
Cleopatra, powerful women in history often get an unfair shake, either treated as footnotes on their husbands and or accused of your standard issue sexual depravity. But regardless,
That does
Justinian
happen.
and Theodora's mutual love and support make them one of history's finest power couples. And finally, you've heard of marrying for political alliance.
A lot of with Cleopatra and Theodora, they are also like exceptions to the rule, where a lot of women are have acted like accessories to their husband's rule. I guess we have to acknowledge that what they did was a little bit more extraordinary than that. It kind of depends on what degree of agency they have in that relationship, because they'll not always be allowed to have that level of power. Sometimes the women will be able to assert a degree of power in a relationship. It really depends. It's such a case-by-case thing.
But what about marrying your way into a brand new country, and a world-conquering empire at that?
Ooh,
well,
who is
that
this?
brings us all the way up to the late 1400s, when the kingdoms of Castile, Aragon, and Portugal were wrapping up their 7th century reconquista against the Moors. In 1469, Princess Isabella of Castile had subverted the latest of her brother King Henry's attempts to marry her off to the Prince of Portugal, and instead got herself engaged to her second cousin, Prince Ferdinand of Aragon.
Yeah, it's kind of normal back then.
An interfamilial pairing like this was not only icky, but explicitly illegal, so Ferdinand and Isabella had to get a formal dispensation.
Oh, really? I assumed that was normal for, like, second cousin. I'm just like, oh, I've heard of worse. But okay, I guess that wasn't cool.
Prince Ferdinand of Aragon. Now, an interfamilial pairing like this was not only icky, but explicitly illegal, so Ferdinand and Isabella had to get a formal dispensation to marry from the Vatican itself. Luckily, the Pope in question was none other than Rodrigo Daughterbanger Borgia, who never so much as blinked at the implications of incest. So that legal roadblock...
I got in a fist fight with him in a video game once. I had a professor that was teaching me, like, Middle Ages history stuff, medieval stuff. And somebody brought up Assassin's Creed in that class, and he said that he'd not played it, but he'd seen stuff from it, and like visually that they're brilliant. But like the go-to thing that he said is like, you get to get in a fist fight with the Pope. Like, what else could you want in life? And he was with historians, they don't really like to have fun usually. They don't like it when you mess with history and have fun at the expense of history. So I thought that was incredibly amusing when he said that. It was that guy. That's kind of funny.
Block was cleared with unsettling ease, and the happy prince and princess patiently waited to assume their thrones. After Henry of Castile died in 1474
really
and John of Aragon died in 1479, Isabella and Ferdinand became the sole rulers of the combined kingdom of Castile and Aragon, which stretched across Iberia and all the way to Sicily. From there, it was go time. Following a slew of overdue reforms to the economy and justice system, Ferdinand and Isabella began a final push into Granada to conquer the last Muslim pocket of Iberia. By 1492, they reconquisted their way to the fortress of Alhambra. To the delight of geometry teachers around the world, they preserved the palace and all of its Islamic artwork, but they were a lot less forgiving on a personal level. Jews and Muslims across Spain were forced to convert or leave, and so the king and queen brought centuries of beautiful religious multiculturalism to a grinding halt. But as you probably know, that is far from the only thing to have happened in 1492, as the monarchs financed the transatlantic voyage of famed Genoan cheesemaker and part-time murderer Christopher Columbus.
Oh,
His
God.
voyages opened up the door
He's
to a
banned from
century
this
of
channel,
rapid
guys. We're not allowed to
colonization
talk
and
about
made
him.
Spain fabulously rich. Some economists would argue too rich. Though Isabella died in 1504 and Ferdinand died in 1516, the consequences of their marriage affected literally almost everything. Their daughter Joanna inherited the Spanish throne and proceeded to marry into the soon-to-be notorious Habsburg family, whose subsequent empire is inversely proportional to the size of their gene pool. And that is how one frisky family reunion took Spain from this to this. And though I may be disgusted by the context, I'm also quite impressed because Ferdinand and Isabella are easily one of the most consequential couples in world history. So we've learned a little bit about history, but what can these couples tell us about love? Well, I'd say it's one, given some historians have devoted their entire careers to erasing homosexuality and or slandering every single woman in power, always consider whom you take relationship advice from. And yes, I do see the irony in that statement. Two, stay grounded in your relationship. A Roman province is no substitute for honest affection. Three, effective communication and teamwork strategies are a crucial stepping stone on your path to both a healthy relationship and imperial glory. And number four, oh gosh, look at the time. You know, it goes so fast when you're having fun, but that's all we've got here today, so I'll see you next time. Later! Thank you so much for watching.
So that was really cool. I really like that one. So they did another one of these this year, and I'm going to watch that and put a video out for that one tomorrow. So, yeah. As far as this one goes, it brought up some really fun questions, like the role of women in power, homosexuality, well, LGBTQ, but like the whole spectrum of stuff, and its role in history, which is rather complicated. It really is difficult. And while there are plenty of historians who I'm sure just straight up don't want to recognize that stuff occurred in certain historical contexts, I will say that it is also very hard to verify in a lot of cases. Like his example can't speak for, and his is in literature, correct? Like that's a little bit different. But where we can find it, like, yeah, there's so many amazing stories. Like, recently I learned about, it's kind of, I don't want to say it's, a perfect example of, like, the T in the LGBTQ stuff, in history, but I've been learning about third gender societies that have existed throughout history, where we have men who live their lives as women, go on to marry men, and I don't know where they would fall on like the gender spectrum today, but I've been learning a little bit more about that stuff, and I'm like, wow, this stuff's been around forever in some capacity or another. I would assume that stuff would get pushed completely underground in like, if we're talking about like the distant past, but no, like there are some civilizations that even accepted that sort of stuff. So it's really cool to open up your mind, broaden your perspective, because honestly, the more we change, sometimes the more we stay the same. There's a historical precedent for most things. So if that's anything worth mentioning, I don't know. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm excited to learn about some more of these. I'm looking at the little thumbnail here, and I'm not really sure who these are supposed to be. I might know who this guy is, but he could be any guy with a wig. So I'm not sure. I guess we'll see. Thanks for watching, and I will see you tomorrow with the next one. All right.